The development of the English language on the British Isles. The ancient Britons and their language. Several significant historical events led to the appearance and the development of the language which we now call English. The first mentioning of Britain dates back to the 4th century, and the people who lived there were called the Britons. They belonged to the Celtic race, and the language they spoke was Celtic. The Britons were governed by a class of pirates called the Druids, who had a great power over them. Few traits of the Celtic language are to be found in the English today. For example, Stratford-on-Avon, Avon River, Loch Ness, Loch Lake. The Celts came to Britain Isles from France about 3,000 years ago. The language they spoke was Celtic. Their culture, that is to say, their way of thinking and their understanding of nature were very primitive. The Celts were strong, tall fighters who learned to mine tin and to carry on trade with their neighbors. They observed the early Britons and became the ancestors of Scots, Irish, and Welsh people. Celtic tribes called the Picts penetrates into mountains in the north. Some Picts, as well as the tribes of Scots, settled in the north. The Scots came in such large number that in time the name of Scotland was given to the country. Powerful Celtic tribes, the Britons held the most over the country. Celts had no town and lived in villages. They were acquainted with the use of copper, iron, and tin. They kept large herds of cattle and sheep. They also cultivated crops. The Britons were more civilized than other tribes. Their clothing was made of wool, wooden in color, while other tribes wore skins. Celts worshipped nature and believed in many gods. Mythology is a collection of stories telling people beliefs and history. Some major issues are the origin of humanity and its traditions and the way in which the natural and human world features. Most often, the daily activities are described in mythology. Their love affairs, pleasures, jealous, rage, ambitions, and skills. In the times of Celts, different kinds of mythological narrations appeared. Kinds of mythological narrations, legends. Unlike many myths, legends do not have a religious or supernatural context. Now we might still gain a philosophical and moral meaning from a legend. An example of legend is the tale of Atlantis. Folklore. While legends and myths might be embarrassed as true stories, folk tales are known to be fictions. They are often told only within limited geographical area, sometimes rather small, such as town, a mountain range, but more often it is a country. Fables. The emphasis of a fable is always on a moral. It's a short story which has an animal as the main characters. Primitive myths, they were generally stories about nature, usually told by primitive priests such as shamans. Pagan myths, these were like a Greek and Roman tales of an interplay between deities and the humans. According to the themes raised in myths, they can be divided into four main groups: cosmic myths, physics myths, hero myths, and the places and object myths. Myths grant continuity and stability to a culture. They foster a shared set of perspectives, values, history, and so on. By means of these communal tales, we are connected to one another. Myths present guidelines for living. When myths tell the readers about the activities and attitudes of the deities, that is, the moral turn implies society's expectation for our own behavior and standards. In myths, we set typical situations and the options which can be selected in those situations. Myths justify culture's activities. Myths given means to live within all the difficulties. The pain becomes, for example, the pain becomes more bearable because people believe that all the trials have a certain meaning. Myths explained the unexplained. Myths offer role models. About the first century, Britain was conquered by the powerful state of Roman. The Roman period occupies the time beginning with the 1st century up to the 6th century. The Romans lived on a peninsula, which is now called Italy, and their language was Latin. This was a people of practical men. They were very clever at making hard roads and building bridges. Many things that the Romans taught the English were given Latin names, and the names of many English towns never dropped the Latin endings. For example, Manchester, Lancaster, and so on. The monasteries where art and writing was taught became the scientific center of the country. The monks wrote stories and verses. Though the poets were English, they were supposed to write in Latin, but now, notwithstanding this custom, there were some poets who wrote in Anglo-Saxon. For example, Cadman. He wrote the poem, and it tells us the Bible story in verses. The next period is marked by the invasions of Britain by Germanic tribes. Among these invaders, these were German tribes called Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, who lived in the northern and central parts of Europe. They kicked the country back in its educational and cultural development. As they were legend, the names of their god are still preserved in their English language. It is well known that Jusku, for example, was the god of darkness. Odin was the god of war, and so on. When the people learned to divide it months into weeks and every week into 7 days, they gave the names of their gods. So it is easy to guess that Sunday is the day of sun, Monday moon, Tuesday day of God, Jusku, Wednesday Woden's day, Thursday Sunday's day, Friday Friday's day, Saturday Saturn days. Soon after these invasions, Britain split up into 7 kingdoms: Kent, Sussex, Wessex, Mercia, East Anglia, and Northumbria. The Anglo-Saxons and the Jutes quarreled a lot with one another, and they fight for supreme power. But nevertheless, they became one nation in the course of a few centuries. They spoke different dialects of the West Germanic language, but they had no written language yet. And the stories and the poems they composed had to be memorized. The famous Beowulf belonged to them.